You're listening to the Anxiety Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Georgie Collinson, anxiety mindset coach, naturopath, hypnotherapist, and creator of the 90-day Anxiety Reset program. This is where I help women with high-functioning anxiety just like you master that anxious mind. In this episode, I speak with Stephanie Hausler. She is a qualified yoga instructor and breathwork facilitator, and she leads the breathwork classes for the Anxiety Masters membership. Stephanie has a beautiful journey to share, one that I'm sure so many of you can relate to and will find very inspiring regarding what is possible for you if you are feeling stuck, anxious, like you can't break out of these patterns. Stephanie was certainly in that place herself, and she shares how she moved through it and where she's at now. Honestly, as we're talking about this, it's like looking at a completely different person, and it was so beautiful to talk with her and have her share her journey. So I hope you get a lot out of this episode. I'm sure you will. Okay, over to Steph now. Let's go to the show. Stephanie Hausler, I am, there are the boulders outside.
There they go.
So
right on cue.
I'm so honored to have you here today. We have been doing our best to coordinate a time to chat and have this conversation. And every time there's been something that's come up. Today we're just here meeting and we're just persevering, even though like you're on day one of your period. We've got boulders being smashed outside my window, which has been just delightful. And we're going to persist because I think it's a beautiful kind of metaphor to share for the world, for everyone listening, that there's never a perfect time.
Absolutely.
So thank you for being here. Thanks for being here, even though, you know, you're at that place of your cycle. It's not necessarily the most ideal, and we've got the boulders and all the things going on, but it's beautiful to chat with you.
It's so beautiful to be here, Georgie. Thank you. And yeah, it's been like a couple of months, I reckon, we've been planning this for. So
yeah.
But it's so funny you bring up that idea of perfect timing, because as I was just saying before, I definitely went into that perfectionist kind of mindset leading up to this, like, oh, maybe today's not actually the best day. Maybe I could find myself at a better space in my cycle. And yeah, I had to really bring myself back and be like, wow, there is no such thing as a perfect time. So surrender.
Seriously, we are surrendering. And I apologize to anyone listening to the boulders in the background being smashed up. We are, you know, I'm going to try and mute myself from time to time to cut out some of it, but we'll see how we go. Yeah, we had moments where things didn't line up for me, things didn't line up for you, because it's really important to capture that energy where you're feeling in the right space and check in with yourself and set that boundary of like, oh, how am I feeling? Do I really want to show up like this? But at the same time, sometimes we've just got to go for it, because, and particularly when it comes to something like doing the healing work, we often, one of the biggest things I hear, Steph, is like, I'm not ready right now, or there's no time right now, I'm too busy, or it's the lead up to Christmas, or it's like, this doesn't work out. And there's just never a good time.
Absolutely. And I think I find personally that anytime that I have resistance towards something, I deep down, I always know that there's going to be a breakthrough on the other side, but it's so hard to realize that in that moment. And it's so easy for your mind to come up with all those excuses on why you shouldn't do it. And, you know, obviously this is a little bit out of the comfort zone. So there were quite a few nerves leading up to this. So yeah, but now it's something that I've actually learned to look forward to, that sense of like resistance or that sense of like nervousness, because I'm like, oh wow, because I'm in this feeling, it means something epic's going to be on the other side of it. So let's see what that is.
I love that so much. You're going into the challenge because you know it's going to make you grow. And that's what happens. You start to get addicted to the feeling of growth, which is a good addiction to have.
It is, for sure. And that's, I guess, something massively that, I mean, you've been a massive teacher in helping me cultivate that sense of trust. So like becoming a lot more trusting of those kind of situations, which is really, I owe a lot to you for navigating me in that way. So thank you.
Steph, it is my absolute honor. And I'm just so, honestly, I've been looking forward to this chat so much. One more thing that's just been occurring to me as we've been talking about this is this idea of like, how do we know that now is the right time, even though there are physical obstacles to
Mm.
us having this conversation now, even though we've had moments where it's like, you were sick and other things happen. And I'm like, I think it's just something feels right despite the
Yeah.
challenges. So there are
Mm.
moments when you just know it's a no and it just feels like no. There's like an inner repulsion in your body. But I think today we've both come to this with something in us like glowing inside. Something feels warm, something feels like
Yeah.
a yes.
And it's so beautiful to that. It's so funny that you brought that up because it's something that I was actually reflecting on today. As you mentioned, I'm day one of my bleed. And I was just reflecting on how much more over the last like year or two I've been able to connect to that feeling, like that internal yes, or that I guess you call it intuition or that like knowing within my body. And that's something that like used to feel or sound so foreign to me. But I totally understand what you mean.
Yeah, and that's where I think we can almost override some of those blocks. Like there are the mental blocks, like this doesn't look like it makes sense, but something feels right. And then there are times when it just doesn't
Yeah.
make sense on both levels
Yes.
as well. So, okay, let's go back to
Mhm.
Steph. Where were you? Go back to 2020 when we first crossed paths, or just before that. I'd
Oh,
love for you to share with everyone the journey you've been through because I was mentioning to you before we hit record, a lot of women say to me, I interview a lot of like experts in the field on different topics, and they're like, oh, but this person like 100% does this for a living. They've been doing it for years and years and years. And it's like, it doesn't necessarily resonate like that someone can go from just being, not to say you're an ordinary person, of course you're actually a very extraordinary amazing person and everyone actually is,
oh,
but
extraordinary.
it's going from a place of not having like the training, the expertise when we started, and the growth you've made. I'd love you to show people as an example of what's possible from where you were. So take us back, Steph. Where were you before we crossed paths?
Oh, gosh, where do I even begin? 2020, even though it was only 2 years ago, it feels like a completely different version of myself. Like if I would have said to myself back then that, first of all, I would be sitting on a podcast with yourself, facilitating breath work, like public speaking, teaching yoga, using my voice, I would have literally just laughed in your face and said, there's no way I have the confidence for that. There's no way I could do that. Um, so yeah, I guess 2020 was a really pivotal year. Obviously, being in Melbourne and COVID and the lockdown, it gave me a lot of, I guess, space for inner reflection and kind of deciding what I wanted to do with my life. I got back from Canada in about, when was it, 2018. And I think that's when my anxiety started to really spiral out of control, in the sense that it was just, I mean, I'd always had in my awareness that like anxiety was part of my life, or like, that I was a little bit of an anxious person. Maybe I was like always over worried or a little bit extra sensitive, but I didn't actually realize the degree of how much it was holding me back. But on top of that, I was also a massive perfectionist. So I was really, really good at hiding it. So I'd often have people say to me, like, oh, like I can't imagine you having anxiety. Like that's so strange to think about, like as if you have anxiety. Those that I was close to that would kind of like open up about it. So it was also this kind of weird contrast of people also not believing that I was going through these internal struggles.
That is such
So
a good point to highlight there because that is high functioning anxiety. On the
yeah,
outside, you look like you've got it all together. People don't believe and see the inner
yeah,
struggle that's going on because we're good at hiding
yeah.
it.
Oh, absolutely. You get so pro. And it's like that. I think there's that meme where it's like that dog and he's like, everything's fine. And the house in the background's like burning down. And that's like literally what my life would feel
I
like. And
love that meme.
yeah,
Yes. It's like
I know. It's so
all,
relatable. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
fine.
It's
We're
all
good.
fine. We'll just keep
Um,
going. It's fine.
yeah. But I remember like going to certain, for me, a lot of it would come out in social anxiety and within my relationships, especially. Like I was very insecure, and that would come out, as an anxious attachment style. And in social situations, like I remember having like panic attacks, or like, being in my car before I'd go into a social situation, and then just, go in, grab a drink at the bar and just pretend like everything's okay. And I'm literally like, just, oh, like the inside of me is just not, not okay. And I guess on that note as well, like alcohol was something that I always used to suppress that anxiety. It's been a huge part of my journey. And I guess like I've just finished 1 year sober, which has been, yeah, pretty amazing. That's also something I never thought I'd hear myself say,
That's
because
amazing, Steph.
yeah.
We all have, and you know what's funny? It doesn't matter what the substance or what the behavior is. We all have that one
Yeah.
thing that helps us cope, or maybe some of us have
Yeah.
multiple. But it's like whether it's alcohol, food, some people are addicted to porn, some people are addicted to, I
Yeah.
think that's possibly more common with men. Um,
Mm,
but there's also, scrolling on social media, online shopping, getting that dopamine hit from the purchase,
yeah.
and we all get it in different ways. And it's so funny how we can sometimes, I don't know, think that they're separate, like an alcohol dependence is different to food or whatever. It's like all the same, guys.
Yeah, it's all just filling like a void essentially, right? Like trying to kind of create space where there's a sense of emptiness. And I
And
guess that's what it felt like for
to not
me.
have to
Yeah.
feel, to not have to
Yes.
feel the discomfort, which it gives you a temporary relief from, as well.
Yeah.
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 Oh my gosh,
So for
I'm
me,
so
yeah.
proud of you. That's so
Thank
amazing,
you.
Steph. Okay, so 1 year sober, but take us back.
Yeah.
So that was something you used to rely on or depend upon.
Yeah, definitely. And I was that, I was always the life of the party, like loved a drink. And I think that's another reason why people struggled to understand that maybe I was struggling, or maybe I had these things going on, because I was always so confident and so happy. And it's because I was, intoxicating myself and just kind of I was showing up as so far from who I actually was. And that became, yeah, like it just got to a point where I felt as though I couldn't do it anymore. It almost felt like I was lying to myself and lying to everyone around me as well. Like trying to, and then I had to try and keep living up to that standard of that person. So, yeah, it,
Hearing you describe this, I
mm,
remember as we worked together, like, working with this and talking about these things, but knowing you now, it almost feels like we're talking about a different person. Is that how it
does.
feels like for you?
Yeah, I'm trying to like even when you're like taking me back to 2020, I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's so hard to even think of. I know it was only a couple of years ago, but yeah, I feel like I've gone through 2 years of massive growth. And I do think that giving up alcohol for me, like, it's not for everyone. I don't think that some people are fine with alcohol and it works well for them. And I, respect that. But personally, for me, it was something that, like I said, was just taking me further and further away from myself. And in order for me to come back, I think one of the main reasons I wanted to quit drinking was because I was like, I just want to become comfortable with who I am. Like, I want to be comfortable in that discomfort. And for me, the ultimate form of discomfort is walking into a room of people and not having alcohol to rely on, or something to, make me feel more confident, to dampen my insecurity. So, yeah.
It's so funny because in some ways, alcohol can be, we call it like the social lubricant. It's like it can
Mm,
help us connect, but really, it also stifles our connection, because the connection we get when we're drunk with people, like everyone I think has gone through that experience of like your party friends or drunk friends, friends you've
yeah.
made when you're drunk versus friends you've made when you are completely sober. You can
Mm,
reach such a deeper connection when you
absolutely.
actually break down, like from the surface level conversation to a deeper conversation, and two people are completely sober in that conversation. The heart can
Mm,
actually open. You can actually connect to
yeah.
something that feels so much more nourishing than a drunk chat with someone where you're like, I love you.
And once you open up to that space, it's so hard to go back to like, the drunk
Mhm.
surface level chat. And I feel like where I'm at in my life now, I really like, I long for those deeper connections, those heart connections, those, that depth in conversation. So
I
for
can
me,
relate to that.
yeah, it's
Steph,
mm,
people tell me all the time,
yeah.
like they make fun of me. They're like, Georgie, because I always want to go like, tell me about your mum and your dad. Like
Hey.
I can
Yeah. What's your childhood trauma?
seriously, I'm like, that would have been really traumatic for you having to go to boarding school at 8 years old. Like
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
I can't help it. And but it's amazing because it means that I do form deeper relationships. And the people who aren't willing to go there, that's cool. They can just not be close people in my life, you know, and that's fine. That's their journey.
I
But
think that's one of the hardest
oh,
things as well about like, I mean, for me, when I stopped the drinking as well, was that complete like shift in a lot of friendships and kind of feeling like I didn't fit into certain groups anymore and creating, yeah, connections that were more based on actual connection than just friendship for the sake of it, if that makes sense.
totally.
Mm.
Actually, I love that you brought that up because I think that's a really common one, Steph. And
Mm.
it's funny because a lot of people who are about to, like, on the precipice of doing this deep inner work, the stuff they've been ignoring for a very long time or they haven't wanted to deal with, it's like there's this fear of, but I'm going to become this completely different person. Like when we say we're talking about a different person then to now, it's kind of scary for people because it's like, I don't want to lose myself. But tell me everything you've lost in terms of like the things that have changed, the things that have fallen away, let's say that, the things that have um, left your life to make room for better things. Would you say it's anything that you really miss right now? Like the kind of people that you were hanging out with before?
Absolutely not. I think, how you just summed it up so beautifully. Like you have to let go of things in order to make space for new things to come into your life. And the people that are important will stick around as well. Like there's still a lot of connections that I hold from, past friendships, and they're still beautiful. We just maybe have different relationships than we used to. But in terms of what I've gained, like my life's only gotten better since I've stopped drinking and I guess come more into this journey of trying to, yeah, connect more with myself and figure myself out.
That's so amazing. And so there you were back in
Mm,
2020. And how did you come across me and end up joining the Anxiety Reset program?
good question. I think I followed you on Instagram for quite a while because I was in Melbourne and I know you were doing some work down there. And I guess like the anxiety part really got me because for me, that was like, all right, this is my problem. Like, I'm like, at the time, I labeled myself as an anxious person, which I don't try to do anymore. I kind of see it more as, even if I experience sensations of anxiety, I'm like, okay, this is what I'm experiencing. It's not something I identify with.
Yes, that's week
Back
one
then,
now. Just
yeah, yeah.
you don't
Back
identify.
then, back then I was like, I am anxious, like I'm an anxious person and this is
Yeah,
me. So
yeah.
yeah, I think I stumbled across your work through Instagram, and for me, like it was a massive leap investing in something like that. Like I'd never had a coach before, I've never done any online programs, and I remember like trying to justify it to a few people around me, like my partner at the time, and I think even my parents, like, oh no, like I think this will be really good. And yeah, I was really nervous about that investment because it felt really different to anything I'd done before. But like you were saying before, it was this inner knowing. Like I felt as though it was the next step I needed to take.
Yeah. Was there, what were people saying around you, by the way? What were the skeptics having to say? Or were they just kind of like reflecting some of those doubts that can come in?
Just like it's so interesting because it all comes up around the money. Like, oh, that's a lot to invest. Like, people aren't, and it's so funny how quick we are to invest money into things that are so materialistic or so, I don't know, yeah, just things that are disposable, right?
Yeah.
And then when it comes to investing money within, ourself and our mindset and how we're going to show up in this world, there's all of a sudden this sense of resistance, like, oh no, that's too much. I can't invest that much in myself. It wasn't even
100%.
wasn't even a huge investment, like at the end of the day, but for me, someone that's never done anything like that before, or people around me, yeah, they may have questioned it a bit, I guess.
Totally. It's such a mindset thing. You think like, how easy can we just throw away 15 grand, 20 grand on a car, which is a terrible
Yeah,
investment in many ways, like because you don't
yeah,
usually it depreciates in value like from the moment you purchase it and all of those things. In fact, I think, although I would say I think secondhand cars have become more valuable in the last couple of years for whatever reasons. We won't go into it now, but still, it's one of those things that we're just like, oh yeah, that's worth this much. So of course I'm going to spend that money. But we don't, it's like the way you view your entire world, the thing that's influencing the decisions you make, the actions you take, what you experience in this life, the way you feel moment to moment, we're not willing to invest money in that.
Yeah.
Like,
Like investing in our mind as well, and knowing that, for example, with a car, it's like, okay, if your car breaks down, you get a new one. Like, we can't do that with our mind. Like, we can't just replace it, but we still have to put in that energy to maintain it and help it grow. So
and you know
yeah,
the
it's
funny thing too, Steph, when I've
mm,
given people things for free, they don't
mm,
show up.
yes,
So that's the other thing. I'm like, there's that healer part of me, the giver part of me that's like, oh, I'd love to like give someone this massive discount or just give it to them or help someone for free. Like when I give, sometimes in the past, I've found myself, giving a lot of free support on Instagram, and I have to be careful with the boundaries on that because also it just doesn't go anywhere. People don't
yeah.
implement that, they don't value it. When you've got skin in the game, you damn well show up for yourself.
Absolutely. And that's something that I'm learning a lot about now, moving into this space of service and, that idea around energy exchange and the things that I have invested in. Like there's, I've done so many free courses in the day and, sign up for this, sign up for that. But there's something very different when you actually invest in yourself and you make that energetic commitment. It's different.
Totally. You get the value out of it because you're putting the
Yeah.
energy in. So
Yeah.
you make it more powerful because you're showing up, because you're committing, because you're actually putting the time aside to do those things. It's the
Yeah.
very same thing for me. I remember way back starting to invest in these things and being a bit scared, but hearing people talk about like the fact that you get out what you put in. And it's so true every single time. And every time I've signed up for a free course or not paid much for it, I don't show up. It's the same
Yeah.
for me too.
Interesting, isn't it? It's yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it came back to like they were all like, I don't know if it's worth the money, blah, blah, blah. But you did it anyway because you followed that yes that you were feeling.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
take us through the journey, Steph. What was it like
Oh,
going through?
it was my whole life transformed after that course. Like so there was a lot of it's really hard to put into words because it was not like the experience in itself is really yeah, I guess from where I started in that course, and I mean, I had so many nerves leading up to it. Like, what am I doing? Is this where I'm supposed to be? But yeah, I don't know. I'm like kind of struggling to put it into words. I'm
That's
trying to think
okay.
like,
I'm curious,
yeah.
like, because the start I think can be the most challenging part. It's like diving headfirst in. Was it
Mm.
helpful knowing that, like, if you changed your mind in the first few weeks, you could back out? Like, you've got that 30 days to sort of like tough
Yeah,
it
I
out.
forgot about that actually. That was pretty comforting to know that, okay, if this doesn't feel that aligned within the 30 days, I can, you know,
Pull the
pull the
pin.
plug if I need to. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But in the back of my mind, I was kind of like, oh, I'm sure that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But I remember throughout the course, like it came at a really good time for me because I was about to move from Melbourne to Adelaide. I had a lot of different kind of life changes going on at the time. I was, transitioning from working the job that I was been working in for the last 3 years to kind of wanting to shift back into study. So yeah, there was a lot of changes, and I think it was a very like quite an overwhelming time of my life for me. But having that course really gave me this sense of like security and trust in everything that was unfolding.
Yeah. I love what
Mm.
you just said though, because you said it was such a good time. And then you also said it was a really overwhelming time.
Yeah. And
The
both
over-
can exist
yes,
like at the same time.
the
It's yeah.
overwhelming times when we're going through lots of transitions and there's lots of stuff happening can be the best time because you've got that extra support as you move through it.
And I think the really beautiful thing about that course as well was that every week was different. Like I remember some weeks in the live call, like I'd show up and I'd feel great and I was empowered. I was like, this this is amazing. And then other weeks, like we went through some really challenging conversations and deep discussions, and there was tears and emotion and a lot of deep healing. Like it kind of, yeah, it was its own journey in itself. And every, like, I feel like I went through so many different seasons within the course of that entire program, so many different parts of myself.
What do you feel was the most challenging part for you? Was there anything in that program that you remember resisting or fighting against? Because there are certain elements that I know typically
Mhm.
block people, so I'm aware of them, but I'm curious what came up for you, Steph? Is there anything that comes to mind now?
The first thing that comes to mind is the love letter we had to write to ourselves.
Hmm. Yeah, I thought you were going to
And
say that one.
yeah.
Everyone struggles with
um,
that, but it's that's why I push the hardest to get people to do
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. And I think I remember writing it wasn't as bad, but when I had to like record it and listen to it, that was the challenging part for me. Because back then, like now that I reflect on it, I was very much, yeah, very far from, I was very early on, let's say, in that journey of self love, because I really see self love as this spectrum. And I think it's forever changing. And I also don't think self love is something you just get to and you stay there and you're like, I love myself all the time now. Like it's a
Yeah,
practice, and we have to continue to show up in ways that help us come back to that sense of self love. And, I was
100%.
only saying, yeah, I was only saying to someone the other day that, I think where I'm at in my life right now is like more of a sense of like self appreciation. Like I still feel like I have, or some days do feel like self love, but then other days they don't. So I remember that was a very confronting practice, because at that time I was kind of like, I don't love myself and that's how I am. Like I didn't view it in this more like holistic kind of spectrum way that I view it now. So it was a really challenging task for me.
And question, when
Mm.
the negative voice shows up now and you notice that inner critic and you notice yourself having a not loving day and you've kind of eventually kind of gone, "Oh, I'm in this right now." Do you
Mm.
notice it's a different experience or you handle it differently to how you might have in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. Just knowing that that's like being able to name it. That's the biggest thing. I remember that was one of the biggest like mind blowing moments when I was like, wow, so this voice isn't actually me. Like, I remember realizing that and just being like, okay. And also, I can kind of choose what this voice says. Like sometimes it's a lot harder, like you get sucked into its stories, but there is a part of me that actually has power over this, and I can make these choices and I can decide how I want to think about this situation. That for me was like, whoa.
Seriously, and it can be sneaky because then what happens when we find it tricky to do that? We're like, oh, I'm not doing it right. I'm meant to be
Yeah,
loving myself. That's more of the inner critic. So we have to just allow those moments to be there. I have those
yeah,
moments too, but I don't react to them. It's just like,
yeah,
okay, so right now, this is the state I'm in. Obviously, my resilience is low. Obviously, I need to go and address some things. What is it that I need?
yeah. And meeting that, like exactly what you're saying, meeting it with compassion. I think that's something that's been a massive shift, because yeah, I used to just hear that voice, get mad at that voice, like, oh, why am I like this? Whereas now I can see that voice, I can hear it, and meet it in a more compassionate way. I think if we, having the awareness is great, but unless we bring in that sense of compassion as well, it's we're going to go into that sense of judgment, right? And that's just, it's not good for anyone. So
Totally. And I think you've really articulated beautifully the way of navigating through this inner critic that some people do get stuck on without getting into perfection mode of like, I
yeah,
can never think a negative thought. You're allowed to think negative thoughts. That you
yeah,
have an inner critic. It's there.
yeah, it
But
exists.
the only way to work with it is to come back to compassion, come back to non-judgment every
Yeah,
single time. And we can absolutely do that. And we can go from not doing that at all to doing that all the time, which is, I think, what you represent so beautifully. So that's, thank you for sharing that, Steph. But there was
of
one element of the program that really had an impact on you as well and has kind of influenced where you're at now as well. I mean, not only are you doing all your own amazing work, supporting people, but you also are the breathwork facilitator for the Anxiety Masters members. Tell me,
Yeah.
Steph, what was that like discovering breath work in the program?
Yeah. Wow. Even you just saying that, it still just feels so surreal. I'm like, yep,
Yeah,
wow.
I know. Look at you, girl. Look at
Just having
you.
a whoa, this is my life moment.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so the first time I practiced breath work was in the anxiety reset program, and it was like a 20 or 30-minute breathe, I think we went through. And I'd heard about breath work before, obviously coming from a yoga background. I like knew about pranayama and I'd done a lot of, I guess, more like restorative breathing as a result of my practice. But I've never tried the more, intense, or like, I guess you could call it the holotropic or the somatic kind of breath work, the stuff that's supposed to take you a little bit deeper, essentially. Um, so yeah, I remember having this incredible experience during the breath work itself. But I also remember after that, it brought up a lot of emotions. I think I reached out to you a few days after and I was like, Georgie, I'm feeling like a lot is coming up. And now reflecting on it with what I know, it was that breath work was such a pivotal thing for me in bringing stuff to the surface that I needed to deal with.
Yeah.
Maybe areas in my life where I wasn't being honest with myself, wasn't being honest with, the life I was creating, and certain things in my life weren't aligned to where I wanted them to be, but I was kind of really trying to play the whole, once again, it's fine, we're all good. Playing that cool girl, like everything's okay. But yeah, kind of after that breathwork experience, a lot of stuff came up to the surface for me. And it really gave me space to dive into some of that stuff and start processing it and making some really big changes around my life. So it was pivotal in a number of ways. I mean, the experience itself was great. I remember we did, I think it was like an inner child meditation at the end. And I remember lying there and just not being able to get up. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I meditate. I've been practicing meditation for a while, but that just took me to like a whole new level. Like yeah, in this space between sleep and awake and didn't know where I was. It was really beautiful.
You know, how amazing that now you're doing that for a
Yeah,
human going through the anxiety reset program now.
yeah,
Like, it's the
yeah,
coolest thing because healed people heal people.
yeah,
hurt people, but we often forget the other way of saying that, which is that once we are on that healing journey, we get to heal others too. Just whether you're actually doing it, but just by being your friend or being in your life is, when you are radiating that energy and at that place where you've come to acceptance of so many things in yourself, other people get to benefit from that as well. And
yeah.
oh, it's so cool, Steph. It's amazing what you've been able to do as a result of that experience, and I'm just so proud of you. So one thing, hang on, I've lost my train of thought. What was I going to ask you? We're talking about breath work. I'm going to edit this out. Although it doesn't get edited out of the YouTube video. So hi everyone on YouTube. What was I going to add in there? Maybe I've just interrupted our beautiful flow of conversation. I think I was going to come back to. Let's go back. Let's go here. Okay. So, Steph, looking at where you were at that time and where you are now, what's that experience like for you?
It's it's actually quite like emotional to think about. It's just having such a deeper sense of trust in life itself and in myself as well. I think for so long, I didn't realize how debilitated I was by the sense of fear and constantly thinking, you know, the worst was going to happen, or this was going to go wrong, or that was going to go wrong. And now, where I'm at in my life, like I'm just so much more trusting of everything
Mm.
and so much more open to good things coming through. So that's definitely been a massive part of it. And yeah,
I think as well, it's that feeling of even though there can be days of anxiety,
yeah,
you know what to do. You've got tools. It's not going to just like come in and overwhelm you and like take you and swallow you whole.
Yeah, and that is a part of it is, and it comes back to a sense of trust, like knowing that, okay, this is uncomfortable, this sucks right now, but I know that I have the strength, I have the capability to get through this. And on the other side, there's something really beautiful as well. There's something I'm going to learn from this situation. And I think that, yeah,
This
sorry.
is what I wanted to touch on before because you were
Yeah,
mentioning the you did the breath work and all this grief
yeah,
came up, basically. What we would call
yeah,
grief, the stored up stuff that you've been holding in
yeah,
for so long. Now, this is scary for people to hear, especially
yeah,
like I would say 99% of the world's population are suppressing grief and just
yes,
carrying on with life. So
yeah,
to hear that we're like bringing this up deliberately is quite confronting, but at the
yeah.
same time, what's on the other side of that?
Oh, space.
Yeah.
It's, yeah, the thing with, like, I've always been someone that I guess I haven't really been comfortable with feeling my emotions. I've suppressed a lot throughout my life, like just kind of wanted to stay strong for the sake of being strong. I don't have time to be sad. Like, that's kind of was my mentality. And the first time I did actually like a prolonged, like a longer breath work, it was like a 45-minute, a 60-minute deep, deep breath work. And I remember through that experience in itself, emotions coming up that I didn't even knew I was capable of feeling.
Yeah.
And to me, that just says, how long have these been hiding in there? Like how long has this been manifesting inside of me? And the amount of distress internally it's been causing as a result is something that, we can be so unconscious of. We just go
Totally.
through life kind of pushing things down and getting on with it until one day it's going to boil up. It has to come out. It has nowhere to go.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it tends to sort of leak out of us as
Yeah.
anxiety and a panic
Yeah.
attack eventually. That's like
Absolutely.
the volcano erupting moment. It's like, can't take this anymore. The energy has to come out and it's going to come out as a panic attack.
Absolutely. And I think when you go through, like for me, going through those experiences with breath work, as confronting as it sounds, it's giving yourself permission to feel in a safe space and also having someone to hold that space for you. For me, like having that permission to let go and to surrender and to really feel, like I've never really been given that permission before. So it takes you to a space where you actually can go into that sense of deep trust and surrender and knowing that things are going to be okay on the other side.
Mm.
And once we visit those emotions and realize that they're not so scary, it can help us also navigate them when they come back up.
Steph, you have such a gift. Like the way you speak about this is just so beautiful. And I was just thinking as you were saying that, like how what an honor it's been to have been just one element on your path that's helped open you up to being able to
Yeah.
share that. It's so amazing, and I'm so happy to be able to give, also have the opportunity for you to do that in my work and like you brought you
Yeah.
into the family. It's so beautiful. What's next for you, Steph?
Ooh, what's next? So there's some exciting things in the works. I'm running a community down here in Adelaide with my partner. We run Cool to Be Conscious here down here in Adelaide. So it's actually they have communities all across Australia. So they run breathwork and meditation on the beach, which is it's a really cool introduction to breathwork. Very more about bringing us out of the mind and back into the heart. So, very much kind of just that nervous system reset. But I'm also wanting to dive a little bit deeper. So, my partner and I are in the process of, planning some of our own events down here in Adelaide. And the dream would be eventually to be able to take these breathwork events, around different parts of Australia. But also just opening space for more one-on-ones as well and working with women or men or anyone that is wanting to access these deeper parts of themselves and wanting someone to hold space for that, because ultimately that's what made me want to do this work, was through the experiences that I had where people gave me permission to be able to feel into those parts of myself and hold me through that. I was like, I want to be able to hold that space for other people, because we all deserve to feel and we all deserve to go through that in a safe environment as well. For a lot of people, when we think of our emotions or feeling, we haven't really been given a safe space to do so. So yeah, I really hope to bring more of that in as well. Yeah.
That really is what it all comes back to, isn't it? It's just that
Yeah.
way, way long ago when we were just little kids and we felt big emotions, we were told
Mm,
to just smile and get on with it, or
yeah.
don't cry, big girls don't cry, and it wasn't safe. So we learned
Yeah.
to hold it in, and then all this stuff just flows out from there. And this anxiety and mental health stuff that we don't need to carry with us.
Yeah.
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 So, Steph, if anyone's listening and they want to find you and be able to work with you, apart from joining us in Anxiety Masters or the Anxiety Reset program and joining in the breathwork classes that you so beautifully facilitate, where else can we find you?
So the best place would probably be through Instagram. So at the moment, just my personal one. So it's steph.hausler. That's Hausler. However, like I said, there's some exciting stuff in the works. So yeah, hopefully be launching something pretty soon. Yeah, my beautiful partner James and I, we completed our breathwork facilitator training together. And it's something that we're both extremely passionate about. And being able to hold that space as a couple is something that we really want to expand on and bring to more people. And also bringing in that sense of masculine and feminine energy. Yeah, it's something we're extremely passionate about. So we've got a lot of exciting ideas in the works. It's just a matter of getting them going.
Beautiful. Will everyone go over and follow Steph on her journey as things emerge? And Steph, thank you so much for joining me. I feel like this has just been the most perfect chat it could have been. Like I knew it was going to go somewhere special, but I just appreciate you so much. And I'm like, I love you so much. I've got so much love for you and I'm so much pride for you. And I just can't wait to see what unfolds for you, girl.
Thanks, Georgie. And thank you doesn't even cut it for the support and love and everything that you've poured into my journey. Honestly, like it's not even an exaggeration where I say when I say that I wouldn't be where I am today without you. So thank you so much for being who you are and doing the work that you do. It's so important. And I just wish that every woman that's struggling with anxiety would, dive in and give it a go. So yeah.
You make me cry now. Honestly, that is
Oh,
so
wow.
beautiful. Thank you, Steph. Appreciate you so much.
Thanks, Georgie.
If you're ready for the deep dive into this work to master your anxious mind, I invite you to join the Anxiety Reset program. Over 90 days, I'll be guiding you on how to build your mental resilience, reprogram those limiting beliefs that keep you stuck in self-doubt, heal your gut, balance your hormones, nourish your mind, body, and soul. Using a combined approach of naturopathy, nutrition, hypnotherapy, and live group coaching with me, you'll feel supported and motivated to show up for yourself consistently day after day. And this is how you will experience extraordinary results. You can master your anxious mind. The best time to begin is right now. Let's do it together. You'll find the link to learn more in the show notes. Thank you for listening. We have reached the end of this episode. If you enjoy this podcast and you find it helpful, I would really appreciate it if you would hit subscribe or share this episode on your Instagram stories and make sure you tag @Georgie the Naturopath. But that is all for today. Please be kind to yourselves. Know that you are enough and you are exactly where you need to be.